Okay, guys. Part one of our next series, which we're going to talk about Solomon. So what we're going to do is I want to break this into four sections, four easy to understand sections, hopefully. We're going to talk about this week, who was Solomon. After that, we're going to talk about wisdom, what it is, why it's important, and maybe a few of the things that Solomon introduced to us through Proverbs. Three is going to be more some of the lessons that we can learn. Now we know what wisdom is. How can we use that? And, that sort of stuff. And then part four, another look at how Solomon lived his life and how we can use the lessons, good and bad, to obviously improve ourselves and get a better understanding of Solomon and his wisdom. Who was Solomon? Solomon was the son, and he said king, son of King David and Bathsheba. Now, if you're familiar with David, which I think you might be, because I think that was the thing he did with lands, you'd know that Bathsheba was married to somebody else, and David fell to his kind of weaker desires and ended up going through a series of events that led to him obviously being with Bathsheba, and time passes on, and before you know it, Solomon and his brothers come along. It's important to know that with that, God wasn't pleased with David for what he did. That's important. So the firstborn between them, obviously, the baby died. When Solomon came along, he was so grateful for Solomon that, obviously, when David gave him his name, Solomon, the name Solomon literally means peaceful one, the bringer of peace. Which, when you think about what he does in his life, that's actually really relevant. So that's how it came about. And obviously, he was a young man when he became king. He was the next king after King David. Now, it wasn't a straightforward process. It wasn't. There was another guy, another one of David's sons, Adonijah, who, when David was old, he's like an old geezer wrapped up in his sheets. He was cold. He wasn't well. And, all of his family knew he's getting to the age now where, okay, David might be passing on soon. And so Adonijah thinks, right, big brain, I'm going to go get my mates, we're going to have a big party, liven up a bit, make it look official, make myself king. Seemed like the thing to do. Adonijah wasn't the only son that tried to do this to David when he was younger. In fact, he had two other sons. I'm not going to go too much into that because that's a different study, I feel like, who basically went off trying to usurp David in their own way. So Adonijah did just that. He went and got his mates again and was plotting. Now, Nathan, one of Solomon's friends, heard of this and went to Bathsheba and said, listen, Adonijah is basically plotting to make himself king. This isn't good. If you remember, David promised you that Solomon was going to be king. He promised you that one of your sons was going to be king. Solomon was going to be king. So I would go to David. And yeah, she did. She bared down before him, like really just to put the point across, because obviously he was still king, so she had to pay her respects and said, "Look, hey, my son, you promised he was going to be king. Kinda like, I need to know that your son's trying to usurp your throne right now. He's trying to unlawfully make himself king and take that from you." So straight away, David was on it. Even from his bed, he was a boss. I mean, all through his life, King David was a right beast, wasn't he? But even in his bed, he was like, right, no, I know exactly what to do. So he told Nathan to go get his royal mule. So I want to point out, right, this is King David we're talking about, and the thing he asks them to get is the royal mule, right? They could have got a horse. I mean, this is the Middle East. They probably had elephants, all those sorts of grandiose animals that they could have made Solomon parade around on. But he chose his mule, which is interesting. Yeah. And then when that was done, David said, when that's done, blow a trumpet, make sure that that is a victory sound of him coming back from being paraded around the sea, and then once he's back, coronate him, make him king. That's what happened. So. Now, that might sound a little familiar, actually, the whole that whole riding a mule around the town. If we think about Palm Sunday, and when Jesus was riding the donkey and Jesus prayed around, like kind of a coronation sort of thing, like recognition. It's interesting, isn't it? The Bible's very clever like that. Now, the thing is, Solomon, he was a young guy, and I don't know if you've ever been king or you've ever been put in a position of massive responsibility. I mean, it was probably around his late teens. Might have been as young as you guys. Might have been just a little bit older. But he was king now, and he had all this responsibility of watching over his citizens, making sure the country was run well, that the money of this country was put into the right places. And I don't know about you, but I think that'd be really overwhelming for anybody in his position. One night when he was resting, obviously David, that's called King David, gave him some advice. And that was to follow God with all your heart and love God immensely. Just like put all your life into that and follow God. And he did do that. And God came to him in a dream and asked him, "What do you want? I will give you anything you choose." And as some of you may know, he chose wisdom. He answered God and said, "Look, I want to rule my kingdom justly. I want to rule, which is fairly. If so in like a courtroom, the judge is meant to be impartial, fair, just, to make sure that the right things, are proceeded, and that the bad things get caught and such, and to make sure at the end of the day, justice is done, right? And it wants to be. He asked for wisdom so he could run his kingdom right. And God was so pleased with his answer, right? He turned around and says, "Mate, you literally could have asked for money, power. You could have asked to be like a warrior king like your dad was. But no, actually, I'm so pleased with the answer. I'm going to give you all these things anyway." And so not only was Solomon now the wisest king, he was now the wisest man to ever live. And that's in 1 Kings 3, 5-13. God answers him, gives him that wisdom, and straight up just, man is 10 head, right? The guy has 3,000 IQ, and that is the sort of man Solomon became. Now, Solomon is also the author of 2 books in the Bible out of 3 which are considered the wisdom books. The 3 books you should be looking for are Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. Now, I did a little bit of digging. I did look at some other sort of studies, and people look at these 3 books as 3 different people. Like, if you had to describe these books as people, Proverbs, being the book of wisdom primarily, people see that as imagine a teacher has all this head knowledge and is a firm believer that as long as you follow the instructions, follow the wisdom in this book, they'll all lead to living a good life. And the same goes for Ecclesiastes and Job as well. You follow the lessons learned from these books, and you're on your way to living a better life, a good life. Ecclesiastes, being the critic, the 3rd book, is aimed to be like a travelled old man, someone who's experienced life a lot, who's gone through a lot of things and can tell you a few stories. It's just imagine if you went and visited a war veteran, they'd be able to tell you what they've been through and how they overcame their difficulties and how they came to be where they are now. And so he wrote those 3 books. No, he wrote 2 of those 3 books. But I wanted to mention Job because that is an important wisdom book. So if you're actually, I want to get me some wisdom, then it's important to understand that those 3 books particularly, Job and Ecclesiastes, can be a little bit hard. And obviously we're here for you if you want to read those and get a bit of understanding. But I would start with Proverbs, because Proverbs is aimed at you guys. The guys who are right, I want to get me some wisdom, some life lessons in. Where do I start? And that's Proverbs. The main thing that Solomon was known for as well, one of the other things that Solomon was known for was, again, we don't know his wisdom, but his judgment. So one of the more well-known stories is of him and the 2 mothers. So imagine he's on his throne, he's chilling out in his throne room. He's got his, he's got his people coming in because of how wise he was. People used to line up like as far as I could see to go see him to get advice. They would actually come to the king and go, right, look, this is a problem that I'm having. How do I solve it? And these two mothers walk in with a baby, and one presented the baby before the king and said, this lady tried to steal my baby. It's to the other mother. In the night, they both had the babies more or less at the same time, but in the night after, her baby passed away, and she swapped the baby with the baby that belonged to the other mother and tried to claim it as her own. Which is a difficult thing, because imagine you're in Solomon's position now. You've got two ladies that walk in. One's claiming that the other one's fobbing off a dead baby on her, and the other one is claiming that, actually, no, it's my real baby, this person's trying to steal it. And you have to then go, well, there's only one baby and two mothers, what happens here, right? And the answer Solomon gave probably wouldn't have been the one I gave, but he was the wisest man who ever lived, so I can't argue. And they're both calling each other liars and so on. And he goes, right, okay, none of this. God, bring the baby here. Come on, bring him here. So God gets the baby, the mums are watching it and bring him around. It wasn't just a room with Solomon and these two mothers, right? You had his crowd, his people, his family, people in line waiting to see him still. It was a crowd, it's a room full of people watching this happen. And the king just goes, right, God, I want you to take your sword, cut the baby in two, and give the mums each a piece. I don't know about you, but I felt bad for the baby. I mean, it wasn't the baby's fault these two ladies were all confused and couldn't get things right. I mean, poor mom of actual baby, well, actual mom of the baby, don't get me wrong, she'd done nothing wrong at this point. She was just obviously trying to get stuff sorted. But so sure enough, God pulls out his sword and he's about to slash the baby and, well, split. I don't know why I was reminded of that meme where everything was cake. So I had the idea of maybe getting it anyway. And she throws herself between the sword and the baby, and obviously the God obviously doesn't want to hurt the mom. And Solomon calls for him to stop. And he goes, right, okay, surely the woman here that is throwing herself in front of the sword is the baby's mother. Because no mother would willingly let harm come to their baby. But slightly before that, before he asks the God to stop, the mother does say, King, listen, if you're going to cut the baby in half, just, give the baby to the mom to be looked after instead. I'd rather him go away than, and see him suffer than, and then not have the baby at all. So because of that, obviously, Solomon, his wisdom, decided then, right, actually, this is the baby's mother, and obviously gives the baby to his mother, and they go away. And that was like one of those. Again, his answer is like, who does that? But it worked. And while someone would probably look at him and be like, that was risky, dude. That was kind of risky. What if he'd actually chopped a baby in half? He knew what he was doing. What he was looking for was not to cut the baby in half and give it away in two pieces. He was looking to see what the mothers would do. And again, this kind of 20 head, 3,000 IQ, like, what the heck? Just absolutely blows my mind, because that is just not, like, that's how wise he was. That's how educated he was. He was that level of forward thinking. And that's who Solomon was. Now, just want to follow that up by saying, though, even though he was the wisest man that ever lived, doesn't mean he didn't make mistakes. He was still human, he made mistakes. But that'll be something we continue on the last part, because we're going to talk about what happens towards the end of Solomon's life. So that is going to be it for now, guys. That is part one. I hope this is stuck, guys, and I hope you've learned something a little bit more about Solomon. Again, next part is going to be more talking about his wisdom and Proverbs and what we can learn about wisdom and what it is, why it's important, and how valuable it is to us as Christians to be wise and live wisely. and I will see you next time. Goodbye.